Welcome to PSY 316, Study Session 5, Long-Term Memory. Introduction. This is another lecture that comprehensively explains another type of memory called long-term memory. This involves various kinds of long-term memory and forms of encoding in long-term memory. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain how information is stored in the long-term memory. 2. Discuss kinds of long-term memory. And 3. Explains forms of encoding in long-term memory. Pretest. 1. What is procedural memory? 2. What is episodic memory? Content. Long-term memory. Let's get back to our analogy of the carpenter's workshop. Those shelves that represent long-term memory seem to have another magical quality: unlimited capacity. However, the way you place your tools on the shelves is crucial for later retrieval. If you throw anything onto the shelves haphazardly, you may never be able to find the tool you want when you need it. If you organize the tools according to a system, they will be easier to find. Long-term memory is often described as similar to a card catalog in a library, a complicated filing system, or a book index. Kinds of long-term memory. Psychologists are now studying the different types of information in long-term memory, distinguishing between procedural memory, information about how to do various things like riding a bicycle, solving puzzles, and playing golf, and declarative memory, knowledge about facts like names, dates, faces, and golf scores. There are 2 types of declarative memory: episodic and semantic. Episodic memory, sometimes called autobiographical memory, is a type of declarative memory that involves memory about our own experience. Semantic memory is a type of declarative memory that involves meaning independent of our own experiences. This suggests that some aspects of memory may decay while others may continue to function. As we shall see when we discuss the biological basis of memory, it seems that declarative and procedural memory may be controlled by different mechanisms and different parts of the brain. Encoding in long-term memory. How would you get to your memory of your birthday in 1975? Suppose you had celebrated it with a picnic at the Millennium Park in Abuja. You might get it by thinking of picnics or parks in general, of Millennium Park in Abuja, of the people you were with that day, of the food you ate, of the mosquitoes that bit you, of the birthday celebration, or of any of a number of others. Indexes. You would have organized these memories and coded them in some way that makes sense to you. The more associations you have with a piece of information, the easier it will be for you to remember. You won't, however, store every single detail of an experience. You won't remember every word spoken during the 3 hours you were at the park, or every person seen. Rather, you will just remember the highlight. Encoding involves encoding through association, encoding through organization, or the tip of the tongue. 1. Encoding through association. We can think of rehearsal as a continuum. We can memorize information by rote rehearsal, simple repetition, to get it into long-term memory. In general, though, the more elaborate the rehearsal, the more associations you can make between the new information and information you already know, the more effective the encoding and storage of the information. This type of rehearsal, known as association rehearsal, in which connections are made between new and old information, helps us remember information better in the long run. How can you improve your memory? Associational rehearsal can help you remember many kinds of information. 2. Encoding through organization. Association rehearsal is one kind of organization. Think back to the shelves in the workshop. The better you organize material to stack those shelves, the easier it will be to find them. When material is presented in an organized way by categories of related items, for instance, it is easier to remember than when it is presented at random. Bostfield, 1953. When material is presented at random, most people tend to organize it themselves by a technique known as clustering, that is, grouping items into categories. This is the rearranging in the mind the order in which the items were presented. We impose our own subjective organization on unrelated items. 3. The tip of the tongue. You run into someone whose name you're sure you know, but no matter how hard you try, you can't come up with it. Is it Dele or Demilade or Debowale? You know none of those are right, but you have the feeling you are on the right track. You try to remember where you met him. You keep probing until you visualize the model park and you see a man wearing a blue t-shirt. Suddenly, you remember his name is Adewale. Sequence like this goes in our heads all the time. They are called tip of the tongue states. There are situations in which a person cannot recall a word, image, or other memory immediately, but does have some knowledge of it. Sometimes we find such a memory quickly. Sometimes we find it after several hours, and sometimes we never find it at all. After 56 college students had definitions of 49 fairly uncommon words, such as apes, nepotism, cloaca, ambergris, and sampan, and were asked to supply the word, they came up with a total of 360 tip of the tongue states. One definition they were given was a navigational instrument used in measuring angular distance, especially the altitude of sun, moon, and star at sea. Before you read the next paragraph, write down a word or words to fit this definition. If you don't know the word, you are likely to search your memory and come up with words like astrolabe, compass, dividers, and protractor, all of which are similar in meaning to the target word. Or you might go off in a different direction, coming up with words like secant, sextet, sexton, all of which resemble the sound of the word you are looking for. Most people encode material into memory according to two basic signals: how a word sounds and what it means. In all cases of positive tip of the tongue, in which the target word was eventually recalled or recognized, 48% of subjects came up with a word that had the same number of syllables as the target word. 57% guessed the initial letter, and many came up with the correct prefix or suffix. These experiments have shown that we encode items in long-term memory in ways other than meaning alone, and that we retrieve a word or name by the way it looks or sounds, in addition to or instead of whatever it means. By the way, did you ever come up with sextant? 4. Dual coding hypothesis. Other research has shown that we store, recognize, organize, and retrieve material in memory through two basic systems, one using words and one using images, and that these two systems seem to involve different kinds of processing. According to this dual coding hypothesis, Powell, 1975. We use imagery of information about concrete objects and events, and we use words for ideas and language. The two systems are independent but interconnected. Either one can be approached individually, but they transfer information back and forth to each other. Some materials seem to be stored in each of these systems, although controversy exists about the amount and type stored in each. Summary. The lecture explained types of long-term memory, procedural and declarative memories. Also, forms of encoding and long-term memory were discussed. The forms of encoding include encoding through association, encoding through organization, tip of the tongue, and dual coding hypothesis. Post-test. How do you encode information through association? 2. How do you encode information through organization? End of study session 5. Thank you for listening.